Well, Sub-Saharan Africa is emerging from cautious optimism as analysts forecast signs of modest recovery and resilience in Africa's macroeconomic landscape. According to the East Africa Association, the region is poised to witness a stable median GDP growth rate of 3.3%, signaling a recovery phase across most nations. Despite this growth, some experts say the region will require a miracle to create millions of jobs, manage climate change-related crises, and continue investing in regional infrastructure. The economic rebound is forecast to be especially pronounced in the East Africa bloc, which, despite grappling with the security challenges in Sudan and the resurgence of piracy in Somalia, is leading the pack with an impressive regional growth average of 6.5%. Well, for more on the 2024 economic outlook for the East Africa region, we're joined by Agnes Gitao. She is the Executive Director at the Eastern Africa Association and a partner at GBS Africa, where she provides economic and political risk advisory. Hi there, Agnes. Thank you so much for joining us on Global Business Africa. Agnes, looking at some of the challenges that we've mentioned facing the East Africa region, mounting fiscal debt. Recently, we've also been hearing of possible power outages expected in some countries in the region. I'm here in Kenya, and that's been a concern of that possibly being on the cards for an economy like this one. Where is that 6.5% growth likely to come from, Agnes, looking at all those challenges?
Thank you very much, Hannah, for having me. The 6.5 GDP projection for the region may seem unrealistic, given the challenges you highlighted. However, the balance between economic growth and balancing the challenges will require, if not a miracle, some really hard work between the public sector and the private sector. The growth is going to be contributed to by the tourism sector. You're aware, last year, the United Nations World Tourism Association announced that the tourism was going to rebound, growing at 5.1%. And two countries, Kenya and Rwanda, have adopted new policies whereby they have opened their borders to allow for visa-free or visa on arrival for African tourists. This means that we'll see more travelers, not only Africans, coming into the region. We've also seen investment in tourism infrastructure, so new pipelines for new hotels, hospitality, and transport sectors. So these services sector, you're aware, the East African region is very much focused on the services sector, right? So this services sector and investment, both by government and private sector, is what is going to make us achieve the 6.5% growth, double the Sub-Saharan African projection.
Well, Agnes, let's talk about inflation and the weakening of some currencies in the region. How could issues like inflation and the weakening of some currencies prevent the region from perhaps realizing some of its potential this year?
Of course, physical challenges has been from 2023. We'll see a continuation of that in this year, right? But governments, we're likely to see some easing off with inflation lowering to about 6.8% or thereabout, with some countries performing better than others. And see key challenges for countries that are very much dependent on imports, like Kenya. They will struggle to maintain the inflation rate. Other issues to address, of course, is sovereign debt, right? The region, we focus on Ethiopia, which is just defaulted on their Eurobond. Kenya's Eurobond repayment is due in June. So managing those, managing the financial strain, managing the ensuring monetary and physical capabilities are able to manage the inflation. There's a lot of work. Central bank governors will be working extremely hard to ensure that citizens are able to afford goods and services with low inflation. You're going to promote purchasing power. You're going to see more investment by companies, and you're going to see production, which creates jobs, thereby contributing to a positive growth in the region.
So, Agnes, when you talk about some of the sectors that will contribute to that 6.5% growth for the region, while that's really great, I'm sometimes always disappointed when agriculture doesn't come up as one of the sectors that could contribute significantly to growth in any African country, just because of the opportunity when it comes to the agri sector. Is the sector that has so much tremendous potential, does it feel to you that it's probably underexplored? And what are you seeing just in terms of some countries being able able to put themselves even more forward to be able to capitalize on that, on all those opportunities that are in the agri sector in particular?
Anna, for our region in East Africa, we're very prone to climate change, and we've experienced drought. And I think 2022, 2023, there were severe droughts, which of course, it impacted the agriculture sector. Yes, you're absolutely right. How do we make the agriculture sector work in our region? There's been some incredible policies, great on paper. So we have the East Africa agriculture framework for development in the agriculture sector. You also have the African Union policy on agriculture, which was adopted back in 2003, which urges African governments, particularly in the region, to use at least 10% of their budget towards agriculture development. What do you need for the agriculture sector to grow? Investing in ensuring that small-scale farmers have access to high-yielding seeds, also access to finance, and I guess every business needs to access finance, but access finance so that they can buy the required output to invest in the agriculture sector is key, but also really encouraging and supporting with market access. And I think this, with the growth of the intra-Africa trade under the CFTA, I think value chains across in the agriculture sector will see some development. And you're absolutely right. We can do better. 70% of Africa's GDP or African employment is from the agriculture sector. So if we can invest, and it's not rocket science, irrigation, technology, right? Finance. If we can invest in that, and we'll resolve two things. You resolve food security. The inflation we talk about, most of this is because we're importing a lot of our foodstuffs, right? So you'll be able to resolve a lot of issues, create employment, and promote development for the region.
Agnes, you touched on this, and I would like you to give us a bit more detail. Debt burden and it remaining an enormous issue, not just for the East Africa region, but the continent as a whole. And it seems a very difficult balance to strike, Agnes, between servicing debt and doing what needs to be done to grow an economy. Is there a country that you're seeing, Agnes, in the region that's managing to strike that balance?
You know, debt is important for development, right? We have to borrow to grow, and we've seen some benefits of this in the infrastructure development that we witnessed, not only in East Africa, but across the African region. However, how do you ensure that you're prudent and that the funds that you borrow are directed to the projects that you borrowed these funds? But so first of all, addressing mismanagement of funds, right? Curbing corruption. I will have to mention corruption. And I know it's a sensitive or controversial term when you're discussing African businesses, but also diversifying your funding sources, right? Traditionally, we've focused on the Bretton Woods institutions, the Eurobond. You know, most of our African government have come to the market, to the international market. There are alternative sources of financing. We need to start thinking. Some of these are the Gulf investment, Sharia compliant investment. This is an area that we need to explore, but also looking for other alternative for financing, but also making sure that this financing is able to invest in job creation sectors. Are there countries that have been able to manage debt? I'm not sure when you look at the African continent. Our average debt is about 65% to 70% GDP to debt ratio, right? So everyone is struggling. We are having to tighten our belts, but these, of course, you know, the underlying factors that contributed to that. So the pandemic, the crisis in Russia and Ukraine, and also which has been really acquainted with the Middle East crisis. But for me, Anna, the most important thing is ensuring that we're able to deploy these funds to sectors that are job creating, because therefore you'll never be able to repay your debt because you borrow to pay existing debt. We'll see some countries like Kenya, I mentioned the Eurobond repayment is due in June. We'll see how they navigate that. We're going to see a lot of conversation, not only in East Africa region, Anna, but across the African region, whereby countries will approach their creditors to renegotiate their debt or change their their maturity terms, because a lot of
Agnes, thank you so much for that. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for all your insights. Agnes Gattal, she's Executive Director at the East Africa Association and a partner at GBS Africa, where she provides economic and political risk advisory.